Welcome or welcome back. My name is Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really glad you're here because I have another true crime story for you today. This one takes place in the mid 2000s, but as is often the case, the information you need about this case actually begins years earlier. Actually, what I discovered with this case is that there are actually two extremely significant historical events that occurred and majorly contributed to the situation that led to this crime. I believe that extreme PTSD on the part of both the victim and the offender give reasons to why this happened. Of course, everyone's PTSD story is different, and that includes both of the main characters in this story as well. Today's story will discuss the 9/11 attacks, the Afghanistan War, the Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans in 2005, drug use, PTSD, bipolar disorder, SA, R word, murder, horrifying dismemberment of a human body, and cannibalism. And if that's not really what you are in the headspace for today, I totally understand. Go take a nap or read a book or take a bath. Those are awesome. But if you are anything like me, you're going to want to stick around for the ride. Okay, first things first, I want to point out that this story is often referred to as the New Orleans cannibal case, but that's a misnomer. There is no cannibalism in this. While body parts are cooked, none are consumed. So let's just put that out there right now. I don't want you being like, where's the cannibalism? It's really a misnomer. Zack Bowen it's one or the other, was born on May 15th in 1978. He had a brother who was about 3 years older. They lived in California, but his childhood has been explained as nomadic as the family moved around a lot. Zack had a tough time during his teen years. Now, we all have tough times during our teen years. I mean, all of us. In fact, if you didn't have a hard time during your teen years, that means you peaked during your teen years, and then I'm very, very sorry for you. But I digress. Zack would grow to be his full height of 6'10" during middle school. Okay? He wore a size 17 shoe. But he wouldn't actually be able to bulk up to that tall frame for years. So he was skinny and gangly, and like I kind of picture him like, a Great Dane puppy who hasn't like grown into their paws yet. Now, Zack would have a lifetime of self-esteem issues. And I really think that is really his main number one issue. He's always feeling like he's doing everything wrong. And he's got that little voice in his head who's also always telling him that he's doing things wrong or that he's a failure or that he can't get it right. So during high school, he ran for homecoming king, and he told himself that if he won, then he wasn't as messed up as his dark thoughts were always telling him. But his plan didn't work. Okay, the other boys took the homecoming king speeches way more seriously than he did. He ran on a platform of mandatory 2-hour naps a day, which totally would have gotten my vote if I had been voting. But also, like, his jokes didn't land, and he ended up not winning homecoming king. And while those of us who are long done with high school know that losing homecoming king isn't really a big deal, I think it's really important to remember the importance that Zack was putting on winning. He had made this deal with himself that he was not a failure if he was able to do this, and he wasn't. So what that did was just gave him and that little voice more fuel for the argument that he wasn't good enough. He was actually so humiliated that he ended up dropping out of school, and he would not graduate from high school. He would end up traveling with his father to New Orleans, where he got a job as a bartender. He ran a to-go cup window. So in New Orleans, and I believe it's Savannah is the other place in the United States, where you can drink alcohol on the street, like in public, like out, in the street. And so in New Orleans, there are, like, especially on, very, very famous Bourbon Street, there are to-go windows. So he was the cute guy who was hanging out the to-go window, selling drinks to people literally on the street. Like, so it's just like, stop by, get a drink, and head continue on your way, right? That's the party that New Orleans is. That's what you can drink outside, and everyone's always, and it's so far down south that it's pretty much always beautiful, and it's a different world to New Orleans. New Orleans is awesome. So that's what he did. He ran one of the to-go cup windows. And one night, Zack would meet Lana. Now, Lana was an exotic dancer, and Zack fell head over heels, as a boy of 18 is wont to do. And the pair became pregnant, which was when Lana ended up finding out that her new boyfriend was only 18, making him 10 years younger than her. She was 28. Now, she didn't ask his age. She just assumed that he must be at least 21 if he's bartending. This is one of those moments where we don't assume. Yeah, we ask. Anyway, he was definitely 18, but he was very stressed at the idea of being a teenage father. But when he realized that he really needed to step up, he did do so. Their first child was born, and then the pair got married, and then they had a second child. So at this point, Zack realizes that he needs to be more mature about everything that's going on in his life, right? And especially about his earning potential. His family needs insurance. They don't just need clothes and food and a roof, but they also need health insurance. And, that's because of America. So they needed a good, steady stream of income. Lana didn't want to, strip, exotic dance, whatever anymore. And that was really understandable. So Zack, I think this point he got his GED. So he got his GED, which is great. And then he joined the Army. He joined the Army in May of 2000. Now, Zack was a decorated soldier who received several medals, including a NATO medal and a Presidential Unit Citation. He would serve in the MP, that's the military police. Now, in May of 2000, the United States of America was not at war. And it didn't really look like we were headed for a war either. But in September of 2001, the 9/11 attack happened. And everything changed. Now, I'm assuming you know what happened on 9/11, but just quickly in case you don't, this is the shortest, smallest explanation ever. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 4 planes were hijacked at the same time. 2 were crashed into the Twin Towers, otherwise known as One World Trade Center and 2 World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania, where the passengers, knowing about the other planes, managed to take control of the airplane and crash the flight before it could reach its intended target. This was the first foreign attack on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor in 1941. The death toll would reach 2,977, which comprised of 33 airline crew members, 213 flight passengers, and 2,731 ground casualties, including both Twin Towers and the Pentagon. The United States would go to war in Afghanistan the very next month, October 2001. So now Zack has the possibility of being needed in a combat zone. Now, one of the places where Zack would be stationed is Abu Ghraib. Now, there's no way I could get into Abu Ghraib and what happened there. There's no way. I don't have the time, and I haven't done the research for this particular story. However, if you are interested in what happened at Abu Ghraib, watch Ghosts of Abu Ghraib, which is on HBO, and it's a documentary, and it is amazing. So it feels very disrespectful to try to tell you quickly what happened there, but I will do my best. So a combination of superiority, hate, lack of leadership, lack of direction, the young age of the soldiers left in charge would lead to some of the worst human rights abuses in modern history. The picture evidence is extremely damning, the most famous of which has a man standing on a crate with a black hood over his head and wires attached to his hands, which are being held out beside his body. There are many pictures of people being made to simulate sexual acts or made to wear leashes like dogs, and the soldiers in the pictures oftentimes are smiling. It's haunting. Now, I cannot imagine what being stationed there might have done to an already fragile psyche, but I think it's really, really important. And I don't exactly know when it was he was there, but I know he was there. And it had to just be an added level of his PTSD. Now, I know I haven't gotten really into what caused his PTSD, and we're headed that way. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that he also spent some time as a military police military police personnel in Abu Ghraib. And that was not a healthy place to be. Okay, so in December of 2001, he would be stationed in Kosovo, where much of his time was spent discovering mass graves, then bagging and moving bodies. Even worse was the fact that in the spring of 2001, Zack gave some candy to a young Albanian girl from a town nearby, and the girl and her family would be blown to bits because she had spoken to an American soldier. You can imagine, I'm sure, what that does to someone's psyche who is already convinced they're a failure at everything. Meanwhile, Lana, his wife, who is having a very difficult time by herself trying to raise two small children. She had failed to properly fill out the paperwork needed for the family to join him at the base in Germany. So when Zack returned to the base in Germany, it wasn't to see his family like a lot of his, his cohorts, they were going to be seeing their families there. He was just going there to have foot surgery. Now, remember how I mentioned he has size 17 feet? Well, apparently the army didn't have boots that were big enough for him. Why they couldn't special order them is beyond me. But he ended up developing camera toes on both of his feet and having to have surgery, a very, very painful surgery. And for it to get so bad for the army to do surgery, I can't even imagine the pain he was in. Eventually, he and Lana would get the paperwork sorted, and Lana and the kids would come to live at the base in Gisa, Germany. The time that the family spent in Europe was actually quite nice. Lana took the kids to all kinds of historical places, and all four of them got to spend time together. So it was actually good for the family. By the time December 2003 rolled around, Zack's new assignment would be in Kuwait, deployment for the Afghan War. The couple knew that this would be far, far more intensive assignment for Zack. Zack's platoon was set to pick up insurgents who were trying to kill U.S. soldiers. So due to this assignment, the platoon was in daily firefights and dealt with small bombs very often. There was a member of his platoon that he had become very close with. Her name was Rachel, but everyone called her Baz. She was young, strong, creative, bright, joined the military after 9/11 to serve her country. She was barely 5'2", and her fellow soldiers described her as small but mighty. And she was like the one that everyone took care of, right? Like she didn't need taking care of, but they were always like, is Baz okay? So one afternoon when she was riding in the Humvee in the passenger seat, they were hit by a bomb and the Humvee caught fire. Rachel would barely make it out alive, and it was very traumatizing for everyone in the platoon because, again, she was Baz. Meanwhile, back on the military base, Lana had become extremely ill with hepatitis C. Now, the treatment for hepatitis C, while very effective at combating the infection of hepatitis C, has many unpleasant side effects. Fever, extremely high fever, chills, joint aches, hair loss, and low white blood cell count, which has a whole bunch of awful side effects. So basically, you have to suffer through the treatment to get better. Zack wanted to be with Lana and was allowed to visit during the summer, but only for 3 days. And Lana reports that he held her while she shook with 105 fever. This was the only time he was allowed to be with his wife, who, for all he knew, was dying. This was the start of Zack's attitude towards the military beginning to sour. It wouldn't be long before Boz was killed in action and 2 of his fellow soldiers lost their legs. If that wasn't enough, Zack had befriended a little Iraqi boy who had brought Zack Cokes, and in turn, Zack started to teach him English. And the 2 had bonded. It was like Zack was, really missing his kids, and this was helping to fill the hole. It was kind of like this boy was becoming sort of a surrogate child for Zack. They really bonded. And so when the boy's family store and home were blown up by insurgents and the entire family was killed, Zack would fall into a very deep depression. When he got back to Gießen, the base in Germany, in November of 2003, he was different, and Lana noticed right away. While she was beyond excited to see Zack again, he was despondent, depressed, withdrawn, angry. He was mad at the military for keeping him away from his dying wife. He was suffering from extreme survivor guilt due to the loss of many of his fellow soldiers, including Boz. And the beginning stages of PTSD were starting. For instance, his frequent headaches and his difficulty sleeping. Okay, so let's just step back for a minute. Now that you have a sort of an idea of the troubles in Zack's life. The little voice in Zack's head has been telling him that he's a failure his entire life. Even when he tries to prove that voice wrong, that he isn't, he just fails again. As with the Homecoming King situation. Of course, at this point in his life, the failures he sees, imagined or real, are far, far more devastating. He doesn't want to be part of the military anymore. So how does he get himself out? By failing. He just stops working at it. He stops caring. He can't get through all the sit-ups needed. He's not clearing the finish line fast enough. He's not pushing himself to complete what a soldier needs to prove they can do to be a soldier. And eventually, he would be discharged from the military. He's proving to himself that he's a failure. And it's heartbreaking because I don't think that this is a conscious thing. This is what our brains do when we're traumatized and we have PTSD and we don't deal with our pain and our trauma. So Zack's dischargement from the military, even though he was decorated and had reached the rank of sergeant, he'd been a active member for, in the military for, I think it was 4 years, I think. And he had done amazing things. And like I said, reached the rank of sergeant. He would not be given an honorable discharge status that he deserved. Instead, he was granted only a general discharge, which does not come with the status or benefits of being honorably discharged. He didn't tell people in his life about this status. Lana was so upset that he was out of the military that she didn't wait for him to get back to Gießen before leaving for the United States. In fact, she left the kids there. From what I understand, they were enrolled in a really good school, and she wanted them to finish out their year and not be too disrupted by it, which I totally understand and respect. But she left Zack to bring the kids home. She was like, oh, you're out of the military? Fine, I'm out. Like, I'm done. No more. So once everyone was back in the United States, back to New Orleans, Lana made it clear that she was not at all interested in reconciliation. Zack found himself back in New Orleans, back bartending on Bourbon Street. So that is the background information on Zack Bowen. Bowen. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm saying it wrong. Now I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to tell you about Addie Hall. Addie was a free spirit, feisty-tempered, independent artist type, known to be both sweet and tough as nails. She was diagnosed with bipolar and was medicated for the condition. During her preteen years, She was horrifically essayed, so much so that she suffered from terrible UTIs, one so bad it landed her in the hospital. Addie would go on to date men who abused both her spirit and her body, leaving her with a pretty severe PTSD. She was known to be a heavy drinker, and some said that she could be a, quote, mean drunk. During the late summer of 2005, Zack and Addie would, for those of you whose brains work like mine, and when you heard Zack and Addie, you thought of Bones, the TV show, yes, there's a character called Zack Addie in the first 3 seasons of Bones, but that came out, the TV show came out before this horrible thing happened and people knew these 2 names. So for anything like me, that would have driven you crazy. So Zack Addie, the character, existed before the terrible thing that's we're getting to about Zack and Addie. So during the late summer of 2005, Zack and Addie would meet at work. Both were bartenders in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Zack was instantly enamored of her, and he would spend all day at her bar until the manager made him leave. The 2 began a relationship and were kind of an oddball couple because, like I said, Zack is 6'10", and Addie is barely 5 feet. So they kind of like didn't quite, oddball, I think is the right word. The 2 connected on many, many levels. They both loved the spirit and the attitude of the French Quarter, and the couple was official by August of 2005. And a bit of the darkness that inhabited each of them began to clear. But at the end of August that year, a hurricane would hit New Orleans and cause devastating chaos. Leading up to it, Lana would call Zack and insist that he ride out the storm with her and the kids, but he refused to leave Addie. Lana would then invite Addie to join them as well. She was fine, bring her. That's cool. I just want my children's father to be okay. And he was like, no, we're not leaving. We're not evacuating. We're staying. And Lana was furious. As far as she was concerned, he was basically choosing his new girlfriend over his kids. Okay, New Orleans. A couple things about New Orleans. New Orleans is a city that is built below the sea level. It is often referred to as a bowl. The levees that are around the border of the city on the Gulf of Mexico, which is that's the water that's there, are supposed to keep the water out, but they failed during Hurricane Katrina. This was Hurricane Katrina, but they failed, and the stories of the people who were left who couldn't evacuate for whatever reason, and there are some people who couldn't evacuate for very good reasons. Like they didn't evacuate because someone in their family is unmovable, like due to illness, or and in those cases, sometimes it ended up being that the reasons they couldn't move were things that needed electricity. So when the electricity went out, then those devices weren't working anymore, and it was just horrible. If you are at all interested, there are a lot of 911 calls that you can listen to. The 911 operators say that a lot of the times people just seemed to want to keep them on the phone with them, and they would say like the attic is flooding, or I'm on the roof because it's the only part of the house that isn't flooded. Or, I'm on the roof with the babies, or I'm on the roof with the dog, or it was horrifying. And while amazing heroes did come out of the tragedy, Mr. Rogers always says, look to the heroes that are running towards the tragedy. And there are always amazing, incredible people that band together and save lives. It's incredible. There were others who took the tragedy and lawlessness as an excuse to engage in the worst kind of behavior. One man was interviewed who told the reporters that he was killing Black people and had a kill count, just killing Black people. At least 6 New Orleans police officers would be put in prison due to their behavior during the chaos. Um, I highly recommend you do some research and find out about it. It's upsetting. So, like I said, all of New Orleans, except for a very small part of the French Quarter that sat above sea level, did not flood. And the holdouts that did not evacuate were left to their own devices for quite some time. Zack and Addie in the unflooded French Quarter were living their dream. They no longer needed to work. All that mattered was obtaining what was needed to survive. The neighborhood of holdouts banded together. They cleaned up the streets. They made bonfires. They cooked what food they could find and shared it willingly. Zack and Addie had both been bartenders, so they started serving drinks and setting up makeshift bars in the street. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie, of people helping people, of living outside the confines of society, and they both thrived. They loved it. They actually became known as the king and queen of the quarter, and there were newspaper articles reporting on the couple. I mean, they were like local heroes. Now, during their time, Addie would run out of her medication to control her bipolar disorder, and she would never go back onto it. It's a little tidbit of information for you. But eventually, the electricity would come back on, and the world would return to what it was prior to Katrina. Addie and Zack were bummed. They loved the bohemian lifestyle of which the tragedy had allowed them to be a part. Both would spiral into the uncontrollable world of drugs and alcohol. Their fights would become far, far more violent than they'd ever been before, and thinking a fresh start would do them some kind of good, the pair decided to move into an apartment above a voodoo temple. Now, just as they were getting ready to sign the lease, Addie discovered that Zack was cheating on her. And he was cheating on her with a man. Personally, I think cheating is cheating, but she was apparently extra livid. And they say that she texted all of the girls in his phone telling them that he had AIDS, which is so not okay. Like, there's just nothing okay about that. But remember that tidbit of information I gave you before about how she's not on her meds? But that's not the only thing she would do. She would go to the landlord and she would have him change the lease so that the apartment was in her name only. Zack's wouldn't be on it at all. This ended up being the final straw for Zack. Okay. On Tuesday, October 17th, 2006, Zack jumped to his death from the 7th story of the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel. In his pocket, police found his army tags, a key, and a note addressed to police only. The note said, in part, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. If you send a patrol car to 826 North Rampart, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, on the stove, and in the fridge, and a full signed confession from myself, Zack Bowen." Yeah. His note directed authorities to the apartment the couple shared above the voodoo temple. When the police got inside, the first thing that they noticed was how cold it was. The AC was turned down as far as it could go to keep Addie's body from deteriorating too quickly. When the police got there, there were spray painted messages all over the walls, which read things like, "I love her," "I'm a total failure," "look in the oven," with an arrow towards the oven, indicating where they should look. And this is also where they located his full confession, which was written in the back pages of one of Addie's journals. Okay, this is the really, really grotesque part. Just warning you. In a large pot on the range held Addie's severed head. Another pot contained Addie's hands and feet. In the oven, Addie's small legs were charred black. This was where the cannibal name came from, but he wasn't cooking to consume her. He was actually trying to dismember and dispose of her he thought that if he cooked it, he could remove the flesh from the bone easier. They also found in the refrigerator Addie's torso, wrapped up in a garbage bag. The confession informed us that on Thursday, October 5th, when Addie wouldn't, quote, shut the f up, he, quote, calmly strangled her. It was very quick, unquote. Got home that day. He moved Addie to the bathtub where he removed her hands, feet, and head. He said he gave her a terrible haircut and put her head in the oven and her feet and hands in a pot on the stove. While working on all of this, he was drinking constantly, so eventually he passed out. He had the weekend off to take care of everything, but instead he spent his time coked up in bars with various girls. When Sunday rolled around and he was supposed to be spending time with his children, like the children were supposed to come over to his apartment. What? That's not gonna work out very well. He convinced Lana to meet him elsewhere with the kids by promising to give her the $600 he owed in back child support. He then asked if he could clean up his apartment and have the kids all weekend the following weekend. Lana was suspicious, but ultimately agreed. In his confession, he wrote that on Sunday night, he cut off Addie's legs and put them into the roasting pan in the oven, and then he passed out. He woke up 7 hours later to a terrible smell coming from the kitchen. Shocking. He said he would turn off the oven and then he would go to work. This was Monday, and this was the last day that he would work. On Monday evening, he realized what he has done, and he was disgusted with himself. Monday evening, he realized what he had done. So he was in like some sort of weird fugue state this whole time? Sure, his brain's pretty broken. I shouldn't judge. Okay, I'm going to read a part of his confession. Quote, I scared myself, not by the action of calmly strangling the woman I've loved for 1.5 years and then desecrating her body, but by my entire lack of remorse. I've known for forever how horrible of a person I am, ask anyone, and decided to quit my jobs and spend the $1,500 cash I had being happy until I unalived myself. So that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I did not contact any of my family. So that'll explain the shock. Had a fantastic time living out my days. It's just about time now. He then began to abuse himself. He inflicted 28 cigarette burns on his body, one for each year of his life. And he ended his confession with a list of the things that he has failed at in his life. Friends, jobs, military, marriage, love. The apartment that they lived in has been renovated and is now a part of some of the New Orleans ghost tours. According to the internet, you can still visit, which I find to be pretty gruesome. I understand touring, like La Laurie's mansion, her home. I mean, everyone connected to that has been deceased for decades, but Zack and Addie died less than 5 years ago. And they're already have tours going through that apartment. I don't know. I'd love to know what you think. What do you think? Is it grotesque? Is it, we just got to get over it? People love serial killer culture. I mean, that's just how it is. I know. I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know below. Full show notes are below, and I really appreciate you hanging out. If you're still here, oh my gosh, thank you. You have time to and energy to hit like or subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Super helpful to me. Otherwise, do me a favor and be nice to each other out there and be nice to yourself. It's very important. You're amazing. You deserve love, kindness, and joy at every turn. I'll check you next time.